Own Your Mind, Break Mental Chains and Choose Inner Power, written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. There is a quiet kind of suffering that never makes a sound. It doesn't cry out or leave bruises. It sits in the mind, disguised as overthinking, masked as self-doubt, rehearsed in the silent loop of what's wrong with me. It doesn't paralyze you completely. It just slows you, dims you, makes you question your own reflection until it no longer feels like home. The most dangerous prison is the one you stop realizing you're in. We're taught to chase productivity, polish perfection, and perform certainty, while quietly renting our minds to fear. We inherit stories we never wrote, beliefs we never chose, and identities crafted more by survival than by truth. The result? A mind full of noise and a heart half asleep. But what if none of that is who you really are? This book is not about fixing your mind. Your mind isn't broken. It's been conditioned, trained, shaped by repetition, by wounds, by well-meaning voices that didn't always know better. What you'll find in these pages is not motivation, it's liberation, a way back to mental authorship. A blueprint for breaking chains that never belonged to you. There's a moment where the spiral can stop, a breath where the loop can break. That moment begins with a choice. As Mel Robbins said, you are one decision away from a completely different life. Not a louder life, not a busier one, a truer one. This book is your invitation to that decision, and to reclaim the space between your ears, to learn how to lead your thoughts instead of obey them, and to question what you've been told about yourself and write something new. Not through force, but through fierce awareness. Not to become someone else, but to return to the one you were before the noise. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Illusion of the Locked Door. Imagine a prisoner who sits quietly in a dark cell. Dust thickens in the corners. Rust spreads across the iron bars. Outside, the world continues, sunlight rising and falling, but he remains, unmoving, certain of his fate. He does not rattle the bars. He does not cry out. He doesn't even try the door. Because long ago someone told him it was locked. But here's the truth, it was never locked. This is the condition of many minds, not broken, not weak, just believing a story. Somewhere between childhood wonder and adult repetition, we begin accepting certain thoughts as law. I'm not enough. This is just how I am. Nothing ever changes. They calcify over time, quiet as snowfall, until we stop questioning and start surviving. The prison becomes familiar, and familiarity, even when painful, is seductive. But the human mind is not stone, it is air and fire and wire. It adapts. It evolves. It opens, yet too often it becomes a room full of mirrors, all reflecting back the same distorted story. You are trapped, you are small, you have no choice. The lie is not just in the bars, it's in the belief that they are real. You inherited thoughts like old furniture passed down from generations, fears carved by culture, doubts sown by wounded parents, limits stitched by systems that profited from your shrinking. They weren't your design, yet they now decorate your inner world, and because they've been with you so long, they've become sacred. Familiarity breeds loyalty, even to pain. But no story, no belief, no repeated doubt has the right to own you without your permission. This is where awareness becomes your first act of rebellion. When you pause and ask, who decided this thought was true? The illusion starts to dissolve. The door creaks open, light spills in. Begin here, notice. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Watch your thoughts like clouds drifting through a sky. Some will carry thunder. Some will whisper fear. Some will try to make you feel small. But you are not the cloud. You are the sky. And in that awareness, you reclaim authorship. Ownership doesn't mean you control every thought. It means you choose how to relate to them. Some you'll keep. Others you'll release. But the key is always yours, hidden in plain sight. Attention. Where you place it, what you feed, what you follow, that is the architecture of your mental world. And once you realize you've been holding the key all along, something fundamental shifts. Not everything gets easier, but everything becomes more honest, more yours. This isn't about pretending your pain doesn't exist, it's about refusing to let it define your identity. The chain may rattle, but it doesn't bind. The thought may appear, but you are not obligated to believe it. You can rise, not above your mind, but deeper within it, into a place of calm authority. The prison dissolves the moment you stop waiting for someone else to free you. You may still feel the weight of old stories. That's okay. Let awareness be the oil that loosens the bolts. Let curiosity be the hand that tests the door. And when you feel the breeze of your own becoming, step through, slowly, steadily. You were never meant to live in a cage of someone else's imagination. You were made to walk through open doors. The prison of the mind is often imagined, not real. Awareness begins the process of reclaiming your mental freedom. You've always held the key, attention and choice. Where in your life are you still waiting for permission to walk through an open door? Today, write down one limiting thought and ask, who told me this was true? Just that, no fixing, no fighting. Begin with awareness. Chapter 2: The Chainmaker's Culture, Family, and Fear. Every chain has a maker. Every limiting belief has a birthplace. Picture a child in a room full of voices. Some are soft, some sharp. Some praise, some warn. Don't speak too loud. Be good. People like us don't do things like that. The child listens. Not because they understand, but because survival depends on it. Approval is the currency of safety, so they adapt. Shrink here. Stay quiet there. Nod when uncertain. Smile when aching. The world hands them a script, and they memorize the lines. These voices, parents, teachers, television, culture, aren't villains. Most were simply echoing the voices they once heard. Fear passed down like heirlooms. Limitation wrapped in love. You didn't ask for these narratives, but you learned them as truth. Over time, these borrowed beliefs fuse with identity. You no longer remember the moment you decided you were too much, not smart, unworthy of love. You just carry the sentence like it's stitched into your skin. And the more often it plays, the deeper the groove becomes in your mind. That groove becomes a default path. Your thoughts travel it like water finding the lowest point. But beliefs are not facts. They are agreements. Temporary contracts between you and the world. Often signed before you could even read the fine print. Pause for a moment. Consider a belief you've carried for years. Maybe it says you're bad with money, or that you always mess things up, or that you're never chosen first. Ask yourself, where did it begin? Whose voice planted the seed? A parent's offhand comment? A teacher's sigh? A classmate's cruelty? A cultural message repeated until it felt like law? Tracing the origin is not about blame. It's about clarity. When you see the source, you see the story for what it is, a story. Not a prophecy. Not a life sentence. And here's the subtle cruelty of these early beliefs: they often came wrapped in love. A parent warning you not to take risks might have been trying to protect you. A teacher doubting your potential might have believed they were preparing you for disappointment. But intention doesn't equal truth. Love misapplied still wounds. Protection can become a cage. You live in a world that benefits from your doubt. Advertising thrives on it. Institutions shape it. Systems depend on it. A disempowered mind is easier to manage. A person who questions nothing is easy to predict. So from the start, the noise grows louder. Fit in, keep up, don't stand out, don't fall behind. But at some point, if you want to live free, you must step back and ask, whose story am I living? Because here's the quiet revolution: the chain you carry loses strength the moment you name its maker. Awareness exposes its welds. And once you see the chain as handmade, you realize it can also be dismantled. This isn't about rewriting history, it's about reclaiming authorship. You can thank the voices that tried to keep you safe, then walk away. You can honor the pain without letting it steer your future. You can notice the chain, nod at it, and still move forward. Every time you question a thought you never chose, you loosen the link. And the moment you begin to ask, gently, curiously, is this belief still serving me? You shift from prisoner to participant, from script reader to story shaper. Because you are not a product of your past, you are the possibility beyond it. Many limiting beliefs began as inherited scripts, not conscious choices. Beliefs are not facts, they are stories passed down, and often outdated. Awareness of origin begins the process of breaking the chain. What belief are you carrying that might not be yours to keep? Write one limiting belief you hold. Ask, where did this come from, and do I still choose it? Chapter 3: The Inner Narrator. There's a voice in your head. It speaks when you wake, when you fall asleep, when you stare out the window or scroll through your phone. It comments, critiques, analyzes, compares, regrets, fantasizes. It tells stories so convincingly that you rarely question whether those stories are true, because the voice sounds like you. It speaks in your language. It uses your memories, your fears, your dreams, so you assume, this must be me. But it isn't. The inner narrator is not the self, it is a function. Like breathing or blinking. A running commentary evolved to make sense of the world, to simulate outcomes, to protect. But like a fire alarm that goes off at burnt toast, it often mistakes safety for danger and discomfort for threat. It doesn't mean harm, it means well, but it rarely rests, and it rarely reflects truth. Consider how quickly it fills in blanks. A friend doesn't text back and suddenly the narrator spins a drama. They're mad at you. You said something wrong. You're being rejected. None of this is verified. Yet the body responds with tension, the heart picks up speed, and the mind begins rehearsing apologies. All from a single gap, filled with assumption, not fact. This is the default state for many, not living, but narrating. Not experiencing life directly, but interpreting it through a fog of commentary. The danger isn't just stress, it's disconnection. When the narrator takes over, you stop listening to the moment and start obeying the voice, and slowly, the voice becomes the master. But here's the hidden truth: the narrator is not the enemy. It is a tool. You were never meant to eliminate it, only to take back the seat of the observer. Imagine sitting beside a river, watching thoughts float by like leaves. The narrator will still speak, it always does. But instead of diving in, you watch. Instead of reacting, you notice. This shift seems small, but it rewrites the power dynamic. The one who observes the voice is not the voice, and the one who observes has choice. Try this. When a thought arises, I'll fail, they don't like me, I'm not ready, don't argue. Don't chase it. Simply name it. That's fear. That's doubt. That's a memory. That's a prediction. Labeling the thought breaks its spell. It pulls you out of the trance and into awareness, and from awareness, new responses are born. The inner narrator thrives on identification. It wants you to believe that every word it says is absolute. But it is not omniscient. It is habitual. Often, it is recycling old scripts, replaying voices from childhood, echoing cultural noise. Its tone might not even be yours. You just grew used to it, and what you get used to, you start to believe. But belief can be rewritten. Begin listening not for truth, but for tone. Is the voice harsh, rushed, demanding? That's not wisdom. Real inner truth is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't punish. It doesn't threaten. It guides with clarity, not fear. And the more you learn to distinguish between the noise and the knowing, the freer you become. Freedom isn't about silencing the voice, it's about no longer taking orders from it. You don't need to fight your thoughts. You only need to stop mistaking them for commands. The narrator will speak, but you can listen with detachment. And in that space between voice and reaction, power is born, because you are not the voice in your mind, you are the one who hears it. The inner narrator is not your identity, it's a mental function. Observation creates distance, and distance creates freedom. Naming thoughts weakens their control. How often do you mistake your inner commentary for truth? Today, notice one thought and label it, not as truth, just as a pattern. Watch it pass, don't follow. Chapter 4. The Roles You Didn't Audition For. There are roles you've played for so long they've become skin: the peacemaker, the achiever, the invisible one, the strong one. You didn't choose these roles the way an actor chooses a part, you were handed them, often before you could speak. Through a parent's exhaustion, a teacher's bias, a sibling's absence, or society's expectation, you were quietly cast. And so you adapted, not out of ambition, but necessity. You performed. You met the cues. You delivered the lines. You learned that certain behaviors earned safety, praise, or at least less pain. And somewhere along the way, you forgot it was a performance. You believed it was you. But here's the thing: roles are useful in plays, not in life. They simplify, flatten, reduce. And over time, even the most well-rehearsed role becomes a cage, because every role, by definition, is a limitation. To stay in character, you must silence the parts of you that don't fit the script. The overachiever hides their exhaustion, the caretaker suppresses their needs, The quiet one swallows their voice, the strong one never cries. These sacrifices aren't noble, they're erosions, tiny acts of abandonment, repeated until identity feels like obligation. No one notices, because you do it well. That's the tragedy. The better you perform, the less anyone suspects you're acting. But deep down, something aches. Not loudly. Just a subtle hollowness, a quiet sense that some essential part of you is waiting backstage, unheard and unseen. You were never meant to be a character in someone else's play. The mind, when trained into a role, begins to police itself. It filters thoughts to fit the part. It rehearses reactions. It fears deviation. And over time, it forgets the original self, the one that existed before applause and correction shaped your responses. But even the most ingrained role can be questioned. Begin with curiosity. Ask, what role am I playing right now? Not at work, not in public, but in your own mind. Are you the fixer, constantly solving other people's problems before your own? Are you the skeptic, dismissing dreams before they can breathe? Are you the victim, rehearsing helplessness as identity? You don't need to shame the role. It was formed in a moment of need. It helped you survive. But survival is not the same as living. What once served you may now be starving you, and just like any role, this one can be stepped out of. Try imagining the version of you that exists without performance. No script, no audience, just presence. What would they say no to? What would they walk away from? What would they finally express? That version is not fictional. It's buried, not broken. Waiting, not gone. And yes, stepping out of role feels like betrayal at first. To stop being who others expect can bring silence, discomfort, and even backlash. But discomfort is not danger. It's the friction of transformation, the shedding of old costumes that no longer fit. Every time you drop the script and speak from essence, you return to yourself. And that return is not loud. It's not a stage dive. It's a quiet breath. A small yes to your truth. A step away from the mask. Over time, the more you walk in that direction, the less the role calls your name. Because roles are maintained by repetition, break the rhythm, and the illusion fades. You are not here to be convincing. You are here to be whole. Many mental roles are inherited responses to early conditioning. Roles limit authenticity, and often lead to self-abandonment. Dropping the role is the beginning of returning to yourself. What role have you outgrown, but continue to play? Today, notice one moment where you feel the urge to perform. Pause. Choose honesty over habit. Chapter 5. The Room with No Mirrors. Imagine walking into a room with no mirrors. You live there for years. You eat, sleep, work, speak, but you never see your reflection. Eventually, you forget what your face looks like. You begin to rely on others to describe you. One says you're kind. Another calls you difficult. Some ignore you entirely. Slowly, your identity is built from borrowed descriptions, filtered through other people's perceptions. And without a mirror, you begin to believe them all. This is how most people live, with no inner reflection, no pause, no stillness, just movement, less noise. Life becomes a hallway of voices and flashing lights, and in the absence of silence, we forget our own shape. We become whoever the moment requires, whoever others accept, whoever we think we need to be to belong. But without mirrors, without moments of still self-seeing, the truth of who we are fades into a blur. Stillness is the mirror. Without it, thought runs on autopilot, emotion rules unchecked. Attention becomes a kite, yanked by the wind. You begin to mistake urgency for importance, movement for meaning, noise for identity. But beneath all the motion, the self waits. It doesn't compete for volume. It doesn't demand attention, it whispers. And to hear that whisper, you must enter the quiet. Stillness is not inactivity. It is attention without force. It is the moment you stop chasing the next thought and start noticing the one you're in. It is the breath you didn't know you were holding, the silence behind the story, the awareness beneath the reaction. You don't need hours, you don't need a mountaintop or monastery. You need willingness. Just one intentional breath where you don't reach for distraction. One moment where you resist the urge to fill space. That's where the mirror begins to form. In stillness, you begin to see the inner patterns, how certain thoughts spiral, how certain stories trigger fear. You begin to notice the tightness in your chest when you're not speaking your truth, the fatigue behind your smile when you're pretending. Stillness doesn't fix these things, it reveals them. And revelation is the first mercy. Because what you can't see, you can't change. Modern life rewards the opposite. Constant stimulation, instant response. Perform, hustle, post, please. But beneath all of that, a question lingers. Who are you when the roles fall away? When the screen goes dark? When no one is watching? That's not a question you answer with words. It's answered in the pause. Stillness is uncomfortable at first. The moment you stop moving, the mind floods with noise, old regrets rise. Forgotten wounds knock. The narrator we met earlier grows louder, but that's not failure. That's the release. You're not creating the noise, you're finally hearing what's always been there. And when you stay, when you breathe through the chaos without running, you begin to recognize something deeper. A presence, a center. The you that exists beneath identity. It doesn't speak in sentences. It doesn't need approval, it simply is. You are not your noise, you are the awareness of it. The room with no mirrors becomes a room with a window. Light enters. Shadows move. And for the first time you see yourself not as others defined you, not as the world demands you be, but as you are, unadorned and unedited. Stillness is the mirror, and your reflection is waiting. Without stillness, identity becomes a reflection of external noise. Stillness reveals what noise hides. You are not your thoughts, you are the one who sees them. When was the last time you sat in silence, just to hear yourself think? Set a timer for 3 minutes. Sit without distraction. Observe your thoughts without following them. Just notice. Why? Chapter 6, Rewriting the Blueprint. Every house is built from a blueprint. A silent sketch behind every wall, every window, every corner. You don't question it when you walk through the space, it simply is. The foundation beneath your feet, the beams above your head. But what if the blueprint was flawed? What if the rooms were too small for who you've become, the walls too thick for light to enter? The mind is no different. Most people live inside a mental architecture they never designed, beliefs laid down by parents, expectations drawn by society, rules etched by old pain. You navigate its halls every day, wondering why you feel cramped, anxious, or lost, never realizing the blueprint is the problem, not you. You inherited that mental floor plan, but now you hold the pencil. The structure of your mind isn't fixed. Beliefs are not bricks, they are blueprints, changeable, revisable, subject to authorship. But first you must notice which ones you're living in. I can't trust people. I always mess up, nothing ever works out for me. These aren't facts. They are architecture, walls that shape how you move, how you feel, what you allow. Most beliefs were formed in moments of emotion, not logic. A harsh word in childhood, a betrayal in love, a repeated failure. The mind, trying to make sense of pain, writes a rule to prevent it from happening again. But pain makes poor architecture. It builds fortresses instead of homes, and over time, those rules become reinforced. Not because they're true, but because you stop questioning them. But what if you did? What if you held a belief up to the light and asked, "Does this still serve me?" That question alone begins to loosen the nails, and when you find a belief that limits you, you don't need to fight it. You don't need to rip it out. You simply rewrite it, not as blind optimism, but as conscious design. Let's say the old belief says, "I'm not creative." You rewrite, "Creativity is not a trait, it's a muscle I'm learning to use." The shift is subtle, but profound. It creates space. It changes the room you live in. It invites growth instead of guarding against failure. This isn't mental trickery. It's neurological renovation. The brain is malleable. Patterns are changeable. With repetition and intention, the mind rewires itself. The blueprint becomes new. And the house begins to feel like home. But rewriting takes presence. It requires that you slow down enough to hear your internal language. That you notice when a thought closes a door, shuts a window, dims the light, and that you pause long enough to choose again. That pause is power. It is the moment you stop living from memory and begin living from awareness. You are not the architecture you inherited. You are the architect becoming. The most powerful change doesn't come from tearing everything down. It comes from changing one beam at a time, one belief, one story, One word you no longer speak over yourself. Slowly, the structure shifts. The air changes, light returns. And maybe, for the first time, you look around and realize you're standing in a mind that was made for you, not for fear, not for protection, not for performance, but for truth. This is what it means to own your mind, not to control every corner, but to shape it with love, with clarity, with choice. Your mental architecture is inherited but not permanent. Beliefs are blueprints, not facts, they can be revised. Conscious language begins the work of rewriting your internal structure. What belief have you lived inside that no longer fits who you're becoming? Choose one limiting belief. Write a revised version that supports your growth. Speak it aloud, once today, with intention. Chapter 7: The Places You Abandon Yourself. There are moments when silence is not peace, it is self-abandonment. When your truth rises like a wave but you swallow it down to keep things smooth. When a boundary trembles on your lips but you smile instead. When you nod in agreement while your gut twists with quiet rebellion. These are not random acts, they are rehearsals. And with enough repetition, they become a habit, leaving yourself behind to stay acceptable, to stay wanted, to stay safe. At first it seems noble. The peacemaker, out the helper, the flexible one. But underneath, there is erosion, a slow forgetting of your own edges. You say yes when you mean no. You laugh when you want to cry. You perform calm, while a storm screams inside. And each time you do, a small piece of you steps out of the room, hoping someone will notice you're gone, but most don't. Because you play the role well. You've become so practiced at reading the room that you no longer remember how to read yourself. And slowly, invisibility becomes the cost of belonging. This is what self-abandonment looks like, not dramatic, not loud, just subtle choices that chip away at your center. It happens in relationships, at work, in moments that seem harmless. But inside, something keeps score, the body keeps the record. It tightens, it aches, it fatigues. Not because it's broken, but because it's trying to get your attention. You were not made to betray your own voice to keep others comfortable. Somewhere in the past you learned that speaking up led to punishment, that asking for what you need was selfish, that expressing pain made you difficult. These lessons were absorbed, not chosen. They became internal laws. Don't upset anyone, don't be too much, don't rock the boat. And so, you learn to dim, to disappear, to endure. But endurance is not the same as strength. True strength is staying loyal to yourself when it would be easier to please. It is honoring your voice even when your hands shake. It is choosing alignment over approval. And yes, it comes with risk. Some people may pull away when you stop bending. Some dynamics may shift when you stop overgiving. But what you lose in comfort, you gain in truth. And truth is the birthplace of power. Begin noticing the moments when your body contracts, when your breath shortens. When your instinct says one thing and your behavior says another. That is the signal. That is the fork in the road. You can pause. You can check in. You can ask, what do I need right now that I'm about to ignore? Even if you can't speak it yet, noticing it is a step toward return. This isn't about becoming selfish or hard. It's about becoming honest. Integrity isn't just keeping promises to others, it's keeping promises to yourself. The promise to not betray your values. The promise to not silence your truth. The promise to not leave when you're the one who needs you most. Reclaiming your mind means reclaiming the places you left yourself to survive. It means walking back into those rooms, finding the version of you that was told they were too much, too sensitive, too complicated, sitting beside them, listening, and saying, I won't leave you again. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, you stop asking others to rescue you. You become the one who stays, who speaks, or who chooses. And from that place everything begins to change, not from force but from fidelity to your own soul. You are worth staying for. Self-abandonment is often subtle and learned through early conditioning. True strength is staying loyal to your truth, not just avoiding conflict. Reclaiming yourself begins with awareness and small acts of alignment. Where are you saying yes outwardly while screaming no inside? Today, notice one moment you're tempted to self-abandon. Pause. Choose one small act of self-loyalty instead. Chapter 8. Choice is the key. Two people walk through the same storm. Rain slaps their faces. Thunder splits the air. One clenches their fists, curses the sky, feels attacked by the world. The other lowers their shoulders, feels the cold on their skin, and keeps walking with quiet resolve. Same storm, different experience. The difference isn't strength, it's choice. Life will throw the unexpected, pain will arrive uninvited. Thoughts will rise like wild winds, but between the event and your response lives a quiet space. In that space, something sacred waits, the power to choose. Choice is not flashy, it rarely announces itself. It often shows up as a pause, a breath, a whisper saying, "You don't have to go down that same road again." But in a world obsessed with control, choice is misunderstood. You can't always control what enters your mind, but you can choose what stays. You can choose what you engage with. You can choose what gets to shape your reality. Attention is the currency of the mind. Whatever you pay, grows. Pay attention to fear, it multiplies. Pay attention to doubt, it finds reasons to root deeper. But pay attention to presence, to truth, to the small signals of inner alignment, and those grow too. Choice begins with where you place your attention. Most people don't realize they're choosing at all. Their reactions feel automatic, as if wired into their identity. But most of what feels like instinct is actually habit, and habits are learned. They were shaped by repetition, by stories reinforced over the years. That means they can be unlearned, replaced, transformed. What the pattern nan? It starts with one moment. A thought arises, "I'll never get this right." The usual path would be to believe it, follow it, spiral with it. But now you pause, you notice it, and instead of reacting, you redirect. You say, "That's just an old pattern. I choose not to feed it." That redirection is not small, it's revolutionary. Choice doesn't always look powerful. Sometimes it looks like silence when you want to lash out. Sometimes it looks like rest when you've been trained to grind. Sometimes it looks like walking away when the room demands you stay. These acts might seem invisible, but they reshape the entire architecture of your inner world. And here's the beauty of choice: it builds. Each conscious act strengthens your awareness. Each time you step out of default and into intention, you deepen the grooves of freedom. Over time, those grooves become paths. And those paths become your new way of moving through life, not from reaction, but from authorship. You are not at the mercy of your mind. You are not doomed to repeat old loops forever. Yes, thoughts will still arise. Emotions will still swell. But you are not the storm. You are the sky it moves through. And from that vantage point, you can choose, again and again, gently and bravely, to respond with clarity. This is how power grows, not from domination, but from discernment, not from perfection, but from presence. Every time you pause and choose, you return to your center, and from that center you begin to live, not as a victim of inner weather, but as the one who holds the compass. You've always had that compass. You just needed to remember where it lives. You may not control your thoughts, but you can choose your response. Attention is power. What you focus on grows. Small, consistent acts of conscious choice build inner freedom. What's one area of your life where you've been reacting by default instead of choosing with intention? Today, when a negative thought arises, pause, label it. Redirect your attention to something aligned with the self you're becoming. Chapter 9: The Art of Letting Thoughts Pass. Thoughts come like weather. Sometimes they drift soft and slow, like early morning fog. Other times they crash in like a sudden storm, loud and wild, shaking the windows of your mind. And yet, just like weather, no thought lasts forever. The mind's great illusion is that every thought must be obeyed, examined, solved, resisted, or fixed. But there is another way. You can simply let it pass. Most people treat thoughts like facts. A fear arises, and it's treated as prophecy. A doubt appears, and it's received as a verdict. But a thought is only a thought. A mental event. It is not a command, not a truth, not a definition of who you are. The mind produces them the way lungs breathe or the heart beats. You are not failing for having unwanted thoughts. You are simply alive. The real suffering begins when you resist them, when you tense against their presence, when you try to push them away or argue with them. In trying to silence them, you feed them. In trying to control them, you build entire stories around them. Like a fly in a web, the more you struggle, the more entangled you become. But if you could step back, just a little, and allow the thought to exist without reaction, it would begin to lose its grip. Imagine sitting beside a road, watching cars go by. Each thought is a car. Some are noisy, some are strange. Some feel like they demand your attention. But you're just on the roadside, watching. You don't need to jump into every car. You don't need to stop traffic. You can nod as they pass and stay where you are. That's the practice. Observing without attaching, noticing without reacting. You are not the traffic. You are the observer, the witness. This practice doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming selective. Not all thoughts deserve your time. Not all thoughts speak truth. Some are echoes. Some are outdated scripts. Some are emotional residue from the past. Letting them pass doesn't mean denial. It means discernment. You're choosing which voices to invite in, and which to let move on like clouds across the sky. And sometimes, the thoughts that scare you most are the ones that need the least attention. Fear thrives on engagement. Doubt expands when argued with. But when left alone, even the loudest thought fades. It may return, but each time it's met with calm observation, it loses power. Not immediately, but slowly, like a fire without fuel. This is not a trick, it's a skill. And like any skill, it builds with repetition. At first, the pull to react will be strong. You'll feel the urge to explain, fix, control. But the more you practice watching without attaching, the more space you'll feel inside. Space between the thought and your identity, space between reaction and choice, and in that space, peace begins to grow. This is the quiet art of freedom. Not fighting every thought, but learning which ones to follow and which to release. Not needing to win every mental battle, because you've realized you never needed to fight in the first place. Your thoughts will continue to come. Let them. Let them drift in, and let them drift out. Some may whisper, some may roar. But you no longer have to answer every call. You can remain steady. You can remain still. Because peace isn't found in the absence of thought, it's found in the presence of awareness. Thoughts are mental events, not commands or truths. Resisting thoughts often strengthens them. Observing them weakens their grip. Letting thoughts pass builds inner peace and discernment. Which recurring thought have you been fighting that you could instead observe and release? Today, when a troubling thought appears, pause. Say silently, "This is just a thought," let it pass without engaging. Chapter 10. Building Mental Sanctuaries. The mind can be a battlefield or a sanctuary. Most people are taught to fortify, to brace, to fight. They armor themselves with overthinking, retreat behind walls of control, and brace for an enemy that lives within. But there is another way. A gentler, quieter space that doesn't require constant defense. A sanctuary, not from life, but within it. A sanctuary is not escape. It is presence without pressure. It is a corner of your inner world where peace is allowed to bloom without being earned, where silence isn't threatening, and where stillness isn't weakness. It's where your thoughts soften, your breath slows, and your mind stops clinging to the next task, the next fear, the next noise. Most minds run like cities, traffic, alerts, construction zones, constant movement. But even a city needs a park, a bench beneath a tree, a breath between the chaos. That's what you're building now. Not by force, not by making your thoughts disappear, but by claiming space within them. A space that is yours. A space where nothing is required of you except presence. This sanctuary can begin as a ritual, a breath before the phone, a pause between tasks, in a chair by a window, a walk without headphones. It doesn't need candles or cushions, it needs intention. A conscious step out of reaction and into stillness. In that stillness, the mind begins to unfurl, not as a command to relax, but as an invitation. It helps to anchor this space in something physical, a journal that only holds your truth, not your performance, a phrase you whisper when things rush too fast, a place where your body can rest without shrinking. These anchors are signals to your mind: here, we are safe. Here, we are not performing. Here, we return. In time, the sanctuary becomes internal. You carry it with you. In traffic, not in conflict. In rooms that demand too much. You learn to retreat inward, not as withdrawal but as grounding. You hear the chaos, but you're not swept away by it. You feel the tension, but you know how to breathe beneath it. That's not detachment. That's rootedness. This is not about hiding. It's about returning. When life pulls you out of yourself, the sanctuary pulls you back in. It reminds you that you are more than your to-do list, more than your mistakes, more than your thoughts. You are a home. And every home needs care, not just fixing what's broken, but tending what is sacred. The more often you return to this space, the more your nervous system learns it's possible. Safety is not just external. It can be self-generated. And when you begin to feel safe inside your own mind, something powerful happens. You stop needing the world to give you permission to rest. You give it to yourself. The world will still swirl, fear will still visit. But you are no longer waiting for the storm to pass to find calm. You bring the calm with you. You become the sanctuary. This practice is not loud. It won't always be noticed, but over time it changes everything. It reshapes your inner tone. It teaches you to speak to yourself like someone you trust. It builds an atmosphere where healing can happen without urgency. And in that quiet, your power grows not as armor, but as peace. You are not just learning to think differently. You are learning to live gently with your own mind, and that is a kind of revolution. A mental sanctuary is a chosen space of peace within, not an escape from life. Ritual and intention create safety that can be carried everywhere. Inner calm is built, not found, and it begins with returning to yourself. What's one daily moment you could claim as sanctuary instead of distraction? Today, create a 3-minute pause, sit quietly, breathe deeply, and do nothing. Let it be enough. Let it be yours. Chapter 11. Power without noise. Real power doesn't perform. It doesn't shout across the room, wave for attention, or wear a costume. It moves with quiet certainty, anchored not in image but in presence. The loudest person is not always the strongest. The most visible path is not always the truest. You learn this when you stop trying to appear powerful and start becoming rooted. There's a version of power the world sells: sharp suits, sharp words, constant motion, the illusion of control. It's loud, impressive, temporary, and beneath it, often, is a hollowness, a fear of being seen without the armor. So many chase power as spectacle because they've never known power as stillness. True power is internal. It is not granted by status or achievement, it is claimed in solitude. It is felt in the way you hold your boundary without shouting, in the way you choose your words without apology, in the way you walk away without explanation. It does not need to be proven, only lived. This kind of power cannot be stolen, because it does not depend on anyone else's belief in you. It's born the moment you decide your authority is not for sale, that your worth is not a negotiation, that your value is not a vote. But to get there, you must walk away from the noise. The noise that tells you to prove your intelligence, to outshine, to outperform, to outdo. The noise that confuses dominance with leadership, certainty with wisdom, charisma with truth. You must choose to listen to something quieter, the voice that lives beneath the performance. The one that knows even when it isn't praised, the one that speaks even when no one is watching. Power without noise is subtle. But don't confuse subtle with soft. It is the strength to sit in discomfort without flinching, the patience to wait without forcing, the discernment to act without needing credit. It is the discipline to not react just because you're triggered, to not chase just because you feel left behind, to not speak just to fill silence. This is a different kind of leadership, one that doesn't demand the spotlight because it carries its own light, one that doesn't depend on agreement because it's anchored in alignment. It doesn't need to dominate the room. It becomes the room. And when people step into your presence, they feel it, not because you've declared it, but because you've embodied it. The foundation of this power is self-trust, and self-trust is not built through perfection, it's built through alignment. Through small choices repeated, through boundaries honored, through truth spoken without flinching, you trust yourself when you stop abandoning yourself. Begin noticing where you speak from. Are you speaking to be heard or to express truth? Are you performing clarity, or are you actually clear? Are you leading from pressure, or from presence? These questions won't always offer easy answers, but they will offer depth, and depth is where real power lives. Let the world be noisy. Let others chase the echo. You have work to do that requires quiet, not silence, but clarity. And clarity is born from stillness. When you stop rushing to be seen, you begin to see yourself. When you stop reaching to be chosen, you remember you already belong. Power is not in the volume. It is in the vibration. And yours, once tuned to truth, will speak even when your mouth is closed. You do not need to raise your voice, you only need to root your presence. Real power is quiet, steady, and rooted in self-trust, not performance. Power without noise moves from alignment, not approval. Embodying truth replaces the need to prove it. Where in your life are you mistaking performance for power? Today, choose one moment to act or speak from calm clarity, not from urgency, not for attention, but from presence. Take care and be well.